Robo the Hedge, he looks exactly like Sonic. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a compliment either. It's the reason nobody's allowed to draw him anymore. King Robert O. Hedge, better known as Robo the Hedge, is a turquoise-furred hedgehog so close in build and color to Sonic that characters in his own comic mistake the two of them for each other on sight. He first showed up in Knuckles the Echydna number 11 back in 1998, created by writer Ken Penders and artist Patrick Spaziante as Amy Rose's cousin and the ruler of a distant kingdom called Mercia. He talks like he wandered out of a Renaissance fair and never left. Old English phrasing, a bow slung over one shoulder instead of a gun, a brown hunter's hood, a quiver on his back, leather boots laced in white. That's on purpose. Rob is Archie's version of Robin Hood, right down to leading a resistance called the Crazy Kritter Freedom Fighters out of Deerwood Forest against Dr. Robotnik's regional enforcer, a sub-boss known only as the High Sheriff. For over a decade, he had a real job in that universe, and a full life to go with it. When Dr. Robotnik's forces closed in on Mercia, Rob shipped his own cousin Amy off to the safety of Knothole Village before the kingdom fell. He spent years alone in Deerwood Forest after the rest of his team was captured and roboticized, refusing to give up the fight even as king of a forest instead of a castle. He helped guide the long-lost, lost tribe of Echydnas to the hidden city of Albion, setting fire to the High Sheriff's stronghold as a diversion so the tribe could escape clean. Along the way, he fell for an Echydna named Marianne, married her, and had a son named John. He kept watch over Albion as its long-distance lookout for years, right up until Dr. Finitevus betrayed the city's location to the Eggman Empire and Albion was leveled. He even fought alongside Sonic, Shadow, and Silver in one of the biggest multiversal brawls the comic ever staged, getting flattened by a chaos-charged Super Scourge before recovering, pulling Rosy the Rascal out of the fight to keep her safe, and linking arms with every other freedom fighter in the room in a last-ditch pile-up meant to hold Scourge down until his power burned out. When a new threat named Grandmaster Lord Mordred Hood tried to have his son killed, Rob took his whole family into hiding and left a lieutenant named Bo Sparrow in charge of Mercia in his place. The resemblance to Sonic cut both ways. It wasn't just Rob who got mistaken for the world's fastest hedgehog. During one crisis, Rob himself mistook Antoine de Coulette for the villainous High Sheriff, purely because Antoine's own father happened to share the sheriff's face. And when Silver the Hedgehog arrived from a ruined future hunting for Sonic, the first hedgehog he ran into at Never Lake was Rob, forcing Silver to ask outright whether he had the right one before the two even started talking. A near-identical face used constantly by the writers as a running source of confusion, in a franchise that otherwise only ever has one blue hedgehog to worry about. Then the lawsuits caught up with him before Mordred Hood ever could. Ken Penders' legal battle with Archie Comics ended with Penders holding the copyright to every character he created for the series, and Rob was one of them. Archie didn't wait for the full continuity reboot to act. Sonic Universe issues 46 and 47 quietly swapped him out in late 2012, replacing Rob the Hedge with a nearly identical Archer, that same lieutenant, Bo Sparrow, and swapping out his wife Mary Ann for a rabbit named Thorn the Lop. Same bow, same forest, same brown hood, different legal owner. A king erased not by a villain in his own story, but by a contract he was never written into. Jules and Bernadette Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog has parents. Most people who only know the games would never guess it, and that's exactly the point, because the two hedgehogs who raised him were written out of existence, and Sega has never put anyone else in their place. Jules and Bernadette were created by Ken Penders as Sonic's father and mother, a pair of Great War veterans who served together in the Royal Army before they were married. They met as students of the engineer Nate Morgan, where Bernadette reportedly won every classroom debate the two of them ever had. That's the version of their story that's sweet. Then Dr. Robotnik's rise turns it into something else entirely. During the war, Bernadette led fellow Mobians through secret underground catacombs beneath Mobitropolis to escape enemy mortar fire, using it to outflank the attacking forces from behind. She and Jules became partners on mission after mission and eventually married. Not long after their son Sonic was born, Jules was fatally wounded while trying to rescue a historian named Kirby from enemy territory. His own brother, Charles, the man Sonic would grow up calling Uncle Chuck, had built a machine meant to save him, a Roboticizer, but the tyrant then known as Warlord Julian had secretly sabotaged it, so that anyone placed inside came out alive but stripped of free will. Jules went in and never came back out as himself. When Bernadette later discovered that Julian was using her husband for slave labor and confronted him over it, Julian had her thrown into the very same machine, then lied to Charles and told him she'd broken it playing around. Sonic's own parents spent years as mindless Robians, laboring inside the city the newly renamed Dr. Robotnik now ruled, while Charles kept the truth from Sonic the entire time, not out of cruelty, but because he knew Robotnik would use them as leverage the moment Sonic learned they were still alive. When the truth finally surfaced after Robotropolis was retaken, Sonic couldn't even process that the two Robians in front of him were really his parents. Charles had lied to him for too long for it to feel real. Once it did, Sonic gave Jules and Bernadette wedding bands forged from power rings just to stop them from losing themselves again the next time an Eggman showed up. Even then, their story refused to resolve cleanly. A mystical being called the Bem restored Bernadette's free will in the year 3236, but left Jules, a Robian, for years afterward, meaning Sonic had a flesh-and-blood mother and a robotic father living under the same roof. Later, the sorcerer Naugus offered to reverse Jules' condition entirely and make him human again, but only if Jules signed a magical contract first. Bernadette was the one who saw through it, arguing Naugus had already tried to kill their son once and couldn't be trusted with another. They threw him out. Years later, after Sonic vanished for a full year following an attack by an alien race called the Zorda, Bernadette welcomed her son home exactly the way she had when he was small, making sure he ate, making sure he went to school, until Jules had to gently remind her that Sonic had grown into an adult while she wasn't there to see it happen. The two of them comforted a young, shaken Amy Rose after a citywide crisis called Operation Clean Sweep, and once sat down to a quiet family dinner with Charles, never realizing that a rebuilt metal Sonic, restored by Charles himself, was watching the three of them through the window with something like grief. Every one of these details, tragic and strange in equal measure, vanished the moment the Super Genesis wave rewrote the timeline in 2013. Sega didn't bring in replacement parents, it simply left the space blank, because Jules and Bernadette, in every version audiences ever saw, only ever existed on Ken Penders' paperwork. Bernadette's own name is its own small piece of that paperwork, most likely borrowed from Penders' real-life wife, Bernadette Penders, which means the legal fight didn't just erase a character, it erased a private tribute. If you've made it this far, hit like and subscribe to see more videos like this, and drop a comment with the forbidden hedgehog you think should have stayed. Let's get back into it. Sonichu. This is the one hedgehog that neither Sega nor its own creator can legally touch. In March of 2000, a Virginia teenager named Christian Weston Chandler needed to design a CD cover for a computer graphics class assignment. He wanted to use Sonic the Hedgehog. He couldn't, it was copyrighted, and even a teenager with a Photoshop trial knew that much. So he improvised. He fused Sonic's design with Pikachu's, gave the result yellow fur, a lightning bolt tail, and quills, and declared it a brand new species, an electric hedgehog Pokemon he named Sonichu. He later claimed at least once that the name was really an anglicized version of Sonichu, Sonic's own Japanese name, a claim even the character's own fan-run encyclopedia says should be taken with a grain of salt, given how often the story of Sonichu's originality has shifted to suit whoever's telling it. In the origin story he built around the character, a wild Pikachu wanders into the blast radius of a battle between Sonic and a creature called the Perfect Chaos Monster, and the collision mutates it into something entirely new on the spot. It's a hedgehog built entirely out of two other companies' hedgehogs and mice, running on borrowed abilities from both, super speed and a spin dash from one side of its ancestry, thunderbolt and thunder attacks from the other. In the comic's own internal logic, the species even gets a full evolutionary line, hatching as a Pichu-like creature called a Sonee before evolving into Sonichu, and eventually into a further form called Ultra Sonichu, an escalation chain built entirely to mirror Pokemon's own rules, hung on a body that's legally supposed to belong to Sega. That single design decision is what makes Sonichu permanently radioactive, no matter how many comics its creator draws. Chandler has stated flatly, in his own words, Sonichu is copyrighted and mine alone, do not steal. But here's the part that undoes his own claim. Because the character is stitched together from Sega's Sonic and Nintendo's Pikachu, nobody can commercially release Sonichu merchandise, games, or media without both companies signing off, and that includes the man who drew him in the first place. In 2016, he sent Sega a direct pitch, an actual formal proposal titled Proposition to Sega, asking the company to bring Sonichu into its own world. Nothing came of it. No statement, no deal, no public sign that Sega ever responded at all. He went ahead anyway, founding a company called Sonichu Entertainment of America to sell Sonichu branded merchandise without either company's blessing, and images have since leaked of a fan-made Sonichu Advance game developed without Sega's involvement or knowledge. The character has spent over 2 decades as one of the internet's most talked about hedgehogs and 0 years as an officially recognized one. Sega owns half of him, Nintendo owns the other half, and the man who invented him owns a claim that neither company will ever honor. King Sonic. This is the only hedgehog on this list that even his own creator isn't allowed to bring back. In an Archie storyline called Mobius 25 Years Later, written by Ken Penders, Sonic ages decades into the future, takes a golden crown and a red cape, and becomes King Sonic of Mobius, visually identical to the hedgehog everyone knows, except for the fact that his entire adult life has gone sideways. He accidentally cost his oldest friend Knuckles an eye with a piece of alien technology during a fight against a corrupted, reality-warping version of Knuckles called Chaos Knuckles, and the two of them have been quietly bitter about it ever since. He fell out with Tails so badly the two didn't speak for years. He married Sally Acorn and had twin children, Sonia and Manic, and became so withdrawn and distant as king that his own wife assumed he was just going through a midlife crisis. Then his entire future collapsed. Sonic's own past, his access to the cosmic interstate, his final battle with Dr. Robotnik, his detonation of a weapon called the Exorta quantum dial, turned out to be quietly unraveling the fabric of space and time, and Mobius itself was on a countdown to destruction. Sonic volunteered to fix it using a time machine built by Eggman himself, stepped inside, and vanished into a timeline he could never fully restore. In the altered future that followed, his own children had been erased from existence, and his wife Sally, believing him gone forever, married the story's new tyrant, an immortal, physically unaging King Shadow who took over Mobius in his absence. Sonic had to claw his way back into his own life, reconciling with Tails, breaking Sally free, and watching his own daughter, a grown-up Echydna named Lara-Su, freeze King Shadow in time with a chaos control blast he couldn't have pulled off himself. Even after winning his throne and his family back, peace didn't last. 5 years later, Sonic was still fending off assassination attempts, Dark Legion spies, and the resurrection of a creature called Perfect Tikhaos, threatening to level Mobius all over again. Every page of that story belongs to Ken Penders. He wrote it, and after the lawsuit, the courts agreed the plot and its surrounding original characters were his. But here's the reversal nobody saw coming. Owning the story didn't mean owning the hedgehog inside it. Sonic, Knuckles, Sally, Tails, and Shadow are all still Sega's property. Trademarked characters, Penders has no legal right to put in any new comic he publishes, even one continuing a story he wrote himself. So when Penders finally revived 25 years later as his own independent project, retitled the Lara-Su Chronicles, he had to rebuild the entire universe around the absence of the very hedgehog whose future the story was originally about, reworking his own daughter character from an Echydna into a brand new alien species called the Echyd'nya, and inventing replacement characters to stand where Sega-owned ones used to be. King Sonic is trapped in a story that exists in exactly one place. The out-of-print back issues nobody's allowed to reprint, written by a man not even permitted to draw the hedgehog he made a king. Scourge the Hedgehog. He was Sonic before Sonic was allowed to be evil, and now he can't be anyone at all. In 1993, writers Mike Kantarovich and Ken Penders pitched a villain called Dr. Sonic, an evil version of Sonic written with all of Dr. Robotnik's menace baked into his personality. Sega's own licensing representative rejected the idea on the spot, insisting an evil Sonic shouldn't act like a mad scientist, he should be Sonic's own personality, just turned inside out. The revised version ran nameless in Sonic the Hedgehog in 11, became Evil Sonic on a later cover, and was eventually dubbed Anti-Sonic years after that. For over a decade, he was little more than a palette-swapped rival, identical to Sonic in every way except a black leather jacket and vintage shades. Then, in 2006, editor Mike Pellerito and artist Patrick Spaziante rebuilt him from the ground up, borrowing his new green color scheme from a famous glitch in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 nicknamed Ashura. New name, new sunglasses, new scars across his chest, courtesy of a punch from the Guardian Lock during a botched attempt to steal the Master Emerald. Spaziante even worked a quiet joke into the redesign. Printed along the side of Scourge's own sunglasses, if you look closely, is the word Sega. Writer Ian Flynn gave him a soul to match, the estranged son of a peace-obsessed alternate dimension version of Jules Hedgehog, a father Scourge dismissed as a man of empty words. What followed was one of the biggest villain arcs Archie's Sonic comics ever attempted. After his transformation, Scourge declared the evil twin shtick over, beat his old guardian half senseless, and used a stolen warp ring to invade Sonic's own home turf alongside his partner in crime, Rouge the Bat. He briefly teamed up with Sonic and Shadow to fight a shared enemy, then turned on both of them the moment it was convenient. He even wandered into a dimension called Litigopolis, ruled by a computerized Robotnik called J.U.D.G.E, and vandalized the place so thoroughly that the machine arrested Sonic Prime for it by mistake. Back home, his long-running rivalry with a coyote named Patch de Coulette turned into a running trade of betrayals, each one trying to strand the other in a dimension that wasn't his own. He allied with the renegade scientist Dr. Finitevus, fell in with the mercenary team called the Destructix, and made Fiona Fox his queen after she left Sonic's side for his. Returning home, he seized his entire world in days, crowned himself king of a planet he renamed Mobius, and rebranded his own gang of anti-freedom fighters into the Suppression Squad. He fought Metal Sonic and a robot clone of himself called Metal Scourge back-to-back, transformed into a rage-fueled Super Scourge using a corrupted version of the Chaos Emeralds called Anarchy Barrel, and was eventually betrayed by his own squad. Even his imprisonment turned into its own saga. Interdimensional officers called Zone Cops fitted him with a control collar that suppressed his speed and had his quills physically trimmed down and inside the No Zone's prison, stripped of the one thing that made him dangerous. Scourge dropped straight to the bottom of the food chain, bullied by the same convicts who would have feared him on the outside. He broke out anyway, busted free by Fiona and the Destructix, and was still plotting his next move when the Super Genocide wave hit and erased the entire multiverse he'd conquered. Fans voted with their wallets and their letters pages the whole time. Scourge became one of the most popular characters the entire Archie run ever produced. And then the Penders lawsuit reached him too. Because Penders co-created the original 1993 concept, he holds a legal claim on the character that Archie's later reboot couldn't erase, even though the version everyone actually loved, the green fur, the sunglasses, the crown, was built by three completely different creators. The result is a character too legally disputed for anyone to safely publish. IDW didn't fight for him. They built a replacement instead, Surge the Tenrec, a green-furred, sharp-toothed rival with an almost identical role, engineered to do everything Scourge used to do without a single legal string attached. In 2021, Penders licensed the real Scourge to a small outfit called Rush. Comics for a miniseries titled Scourge, the Speed Demon. It was cancelled 4 days after it was announced, buried under backlash before a single page shipped. The most popular villain the Sonic comics ever built now exists nowhere. Not in games, not in cartoons, not in any comic anyone's currently willing to print. Out of every hedgehog on this list, which one do you think deserved better? Drop your pick in the comments.